We're back with another rider, another episode. Today we have the lovely Jan in the car. What's it Jan short for?
Janet Marie Blake.
Okay.
Well, everyone knows me as Jan Blake.
Okay, no problem. And we're talking about London. And we're talking about being black in London and coming from the north as a black person. We're saying how black people are different kind of black people from the north up down to London. So we're just going to carry on that conversation and see where it goes from there. So you lived in London for, you said 28 years?
I did.
And why did you move to London first of all?
So originally I moved to London. I followed a theatre company down here from Manchester. I'd failed my A-levels. Theatre company were in Manchester looking for a black actress. They came to the theatre company where I was on a YOP scheme. Remember those days? Youth Opportunity Programme.
Okay.
And they walked in. They wanted to look through the Spotlight, which is like a catalogue of actors. They came in twice. They couldn't find anyone, and then they phoned me at the office and said, would I like to audition? And I'd only been out of school. When I met them, I'd been out of school 3 months. And knew I wasn't going to audition to be an actress because my parents couldn't afford the audition fees. So ended up auditioning for this theatre company, Agit Prop Community Theatre Company.
So just to jump in there, to audition to be an actress, you have to pay fees.
To go to drama school.
Oh, go to drama school.
Yeah, if you do.
But surely, isn't, like you can do maths, higher education, and the government pays. Surely that...
No, not at that time, because I think in those days that wasn't considered state university.
Ah.
So you had to pay your audition fees, but you would have got a grant to go to university.
Okay.
So anyway, long story short, I followed the theatre company down to London, ended up staying. It was a bit of a disaster working with them, but by that time I was cut adrift in London on my own. And you know what it's like? My parents' migration story meant that I thought once you left, you left. So I just stayed in London instead of going back home.
Why didn't it work with the theatre company?
Because they were a little bit treacherous, a little bit naughty. They were a little bit disrespectful, and they, at that time, if you had a black person in your theatre company, you got loads of funding.
So that's why they're searching for a black person, but they didn't.
Well, I think they were searching for a black person for the cast anyway. But it just so happened that at that time, if you had a theatre company and you were employing black people, you would get, and you could prove that by the castings, then you could get funding for being a diversely run company.
Okay.
So anyway, that's how I came down to London. That's why I ended up staying in London. I raised my son down here, and then had a bit of an epiphany. I'd been having several epiphanies, but I hadn't taken any action on them.
And what were those several epiphanies?
The epiphanies were, what the hell are you doing down here? Go home. But I didn't go home until 2014.
So you moved to South London when you first came down?
No, when I first came, I was living in West London.
Okay.
So I was living over in Fernhead Road. From Fernhead Road, I moved to Fulham. From Fulham, I moved to Dalston, and then from Dalston I moved to Deptford. No, that's a lie. I moved from Dalston to Elephant and Castle, and from Elephant and Castle I moved to Deptford.
Oh, had you ever been to London before you moved down there?
As a kid, yeah.
Okay.
Came down.
You had
Family visited.
You had family living down there?
No, we came with family because we had family friends living down here over in Battersea.
Right.
So we'd come down and go to Battersea Park. In the summer holidays, there was always a fun fair or something going on, so we'd come down and do that.
And how did you find London living here in comparison to up north?
All right. I acknowledge the fact that I came here when I was quite young, so I was only 18 when I came to London. But the thing that was most difficult, are we going through the Rotherhithe Tunnel?
Yeah, it's taking us the quickest way.
To Euston?
Yeah, we're going to look. Wait, let me just double check. 48 minutes. Okay. No, it's going a different way now.
Sorry.
Yeah, so, no, don't worry. So,
What was I saying? How did I find living here? I was only 18 when I came, so you kind of... It really was town mouse, country mouse.
yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because I really was a Mancunian country girl. And in Manchester, even though I lived in the black community in Manchester, you're more likely to be accepted as yourself than when I came to London. When I came to London, I was moving with people who, again, because I was so young and naive, I was moving with people who were really good at draining energy and making you feel wrong for being yourself.
Do you think that's because you came from Manchester?
I do think it was because I came from Manchester. I do.
So it's like some tribalism kind of mindset.
Yeah, maybe you could call it that. I think it was also, there's a kind of, people assume when you're not from London that there is a naivety about you, and I guess there was a naivety about me because I was a kid. I think there's naivety in everyone who's not fully formed as an adult yet, when you're just in your double digits, but you've not actually established yourself as an adult. And I think I was vulnerable. I think I was vulnerable because I was quite an innocent girl and I wasn't from London. And then you add to that the idea that if you're black, you're supposed to be a particular type of black person, and that is what you get, your endorsement from being a particular type of black person. I remember riding through Deptford on my bike. My dad's was a Jamaican, taught me and my siblings how to ride a bike. But you come down to London, get on a bike, and people think you're trying to be white, and literally someone shouted that at me in Deptford as I was riding my bike.
For riding a bike, they thought you're trying to be... Well, I suppose it depends on what kind of bike you got.
It's
I don't
just
know.
an ordinary push bike, a woman's push bike.
Oh, is it?
With a seat on the back for my kid, and it's almost like you're not supposed to do that. You don't fit that picture.
I do understand where they're coming from.
Why?
In those days.
It's a bike.
Because, no, what I'm saying, what you would see, I was adopted.
Right.
So my parents were white middle class. So a lot of their friends had those seats on the back for their children. But when I came over to where my birth family was, no black people would do that. If you get on the bike, it's just you, or you put someone on the handlebars. That kind of thing. Yeah. So once you start to get with the carriage and a helmet and all of that thing and a baby bit in the back, it's like, okay. But, and then people who've got time will look at you a certain way. People who are actually doing stuff in their life wouldn't even care.
Yes.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, people with too much time on their hands. But anyway, that's the kind of thing that I think is challenging. If you're made a particular way as a human being, right? There's your personality and everything that comes with that, and then there's the how many drops of melanin you've got in your skin and how that's supposed to impact the way you behave as a human being. But that, to me, that's the lie we've been fed. And then we all swallow the same lie and then start treating each other accordingly. There's nowhere written down that a black woman can't have a baby seat on the back of her bike and ride her bike.
It's safety. Safety straight away. Why would you not put your child in something safe?
And why should I not want to put my child on the back of a seat on a bike? Why does how many drops of melanin I've got in my skin impact that? So they're the kind of things that I think I've struggled with to an extent, mainly because I think, if you're an artist or you're creative, that's how you're born into this world with these skills or these abilities. One of the fundamentals is that you've got to be yourself.
Would you say, so I've heard this before, that the black people up north lean more to the white culture?
What's the white culture?
Or understanding the white culture, where, let's say, it's changed now. I would say it's changed now, but before I saw that when black people go out down in London, they're not trying to really get drunk. and carry on the same way. But where I noticed with black people up north, there was that more of so I used to be in the military, and a lot of the white guys always go out, and always the idea is to get bladdered.
Yes,
do you see what I mean? And you'll notice that also some of the black people who come from up north.
Well, that's not been my experience.
Okay, but that's what I was asking.
Yeah, that's not been my experience, because I'm the old school black people in Manchester. So I'm second generation. You know, I still go down the West Indian Centre with your parents and things like that. I didn't experience drunkenness, the kind of drunkenness that you're talking about. I never experienced within the black community.
Okay.
And that might be a generational thing, which is why I said, you know, I'm second generation. It might be a generational thing.
Right, yeah, I'm first generation born here.
Right, yeah, me too.
Yeah, okay. So what other differences did you find? You spoke about forgiving.
Just space to be yourself. You know, you're allowed to just be yourself.
Okay, but you spoke about black Londoners are not that forgiving.
They're less, I would say my experience of being black in London is that as a community we're less forgiving than the black community in Manchester. But again, you know, there's lots of different pockets of black communities all over the Greater Manchester region, and I would say there's lots of pockets of different black people down here in London, and maybe it's where you live, maybe it's a South London thing, because that's where I was. Maybe it's not so much, it wouldn't be like that in different areas of London, but I only know South East because that's where I was. That's where I lived most of my time in London.
What comes to mind is that obviously as black people there's many different kind of groups, not just on social but also on nationality, heritage.
Yes.
So you've got the Africans, I hear there's a lot of people from the DRC in certain places in Manchester now.
Yeah, a lot of.
And they never used to be there.
Yeah, but that's to do with refugee status, I think.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah,
so would you say the mindset has changed over the time, or the ways?
I would say that any migrant community, especially those who their movement is based on trauma, I think those communities stay very close to each other. And then what is expected of that community, if you're trying to create an idea of what home is, then what is expected that everybody will behave the way they used to behave at home. And the kind of the trauma-informed movement of people from the continent into Europe is it's a double-edged sword, because you're leaving for safety, but then you can find yourself stuck culturally because the idea of your identity is all tied up in that movement and all tied up in safety, and the idea that you would step out of that and just be yourself might not be as welcome. But I don't think it's a different story. I think if your movement is based on necessity and safety, I think you have a different relationship with the place you end up in, and your relationship with your community changes.
I understand. So what jobs did you do in London? You said you left that acting job.
I've always been a performer, so I left the theatre company, ran my own theatre company with a friend of mine for a little while.
Okay, how did that go? What was that about?
It was called Options Limited. So I inherited a theatre company from a women's theatre company I was working with. They gave up the company and gave the company to me. I ran it with a friend of mine for a bit, and after that I discovered the art of storytelling, which I had not heard about as a performing art, but I had someone encouraged me to try it. So I started, and that's been my life ever since.
So when you say storytelling, how does that work?
So I'm a traditional storyteller. I tell traditional folk tales. I travel around the world performing, teaching, coaching, mentoring. I run retreats. all based around. So when I started off, it was literally find folk tales, perform folk tales in schools with a storytelling group called Common Lore, Lore, storytellers and musicians. And I just built my repertoire of stories. So then you have to go into research, finding folk tales. You can read 100 folk tales, only find one that you want to tell. And interspersed during that time, I did a bit of children's television. I did a bit of acting on television, some in theatre, not much. Did a Shakespeare tour to Japan and Malaysia. But what's driven me since I became a storyteller, and even more so since I became a mother, it's the art of storytelling, the art of researching, reconnecting to self through folklore. So again, being of the diaspora, being second generation or first generation born here, it's like, how do you reconnect to your roots? And what are your roots, and how do you access your roots? And there's ways you can get, which I did, and get very pissy and angry about the way things are, until I discovered storytelling. And then that became almost like a gateway to culture and self. So it's almost like you stitch up the wounds with the stories. The stories help you to understand where you've come from originally, culturally, what was true before your people were taken.
So this isn't just about being black or the black diaspora and our history. It's about history overall. Is that correct? And stories from history overall.
Well, I tell traditional folk tales from West Africa, the Caribbean, any country that's had any impact on Africa and the Caribbean. They're the stories that I'm going to tell.
Okay.
So I'll tell Norwegian folk tales, Danish folk tales, Swedish folk tales, English folk tales, Portuguese, Spanish, and then naturally I tell Caribbean and West African, Southwest African.
Can you give us, I'm not sure if the word is a rendition of a short story now?
Can I give you the rendition of a short story? Let me think of one.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, it's my job. It's what I do.
Yeah, I never thought that would be a job.
Yeah, it is. It's a full-time job.
So on your CV it says like full-time storyteller.
Yeah.
That's good. You ever thought of doing you got a YouTube channel?
I have got a YouTube channel.
What's your YouTube channel?
Jan Blake Storyteller.
Jan Blake. So I'll have to put that in the link so people can check you out. And then you've got lots of stories you've done.
Yeah, the stories that I've done up there, and there's also people will have tagged me things that they've captured and put up there. I also am a children's television presenter for CBeebies.
Oh, is it? Excuse me. That's good. That's really good.
So there's a children's television program on at the moment called Musical Storyland. So I started off as researcher, and then they realised they wanted to use me to present some of the programmes.
Oh, because they like your voice.
They like my voice, and they like my style of telling.
Motherly voice.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, that's good.
So yeah, that's what I'm...
Are you ready for this rendition?
I've got to think of the right story first.
Okay.
It has to be the right story.
Okay.
So.
Right, I just had a child yesterday, a son.
Oh, congratulations!
What would you do? I suppose there's no point telling a story to
you can
one
still
day
tell
old.
Stories to babies.
Right, what would you give me a child's story?
A children's story.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give you a children's story. It's a circular story. It's actually a book as well.
Okay.
My book, in fact.
All right. What's the name of the book?
It's called Give Me My Yam.
Give Me My Yam.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it starts off, once upon a time, there was a little boy who lived in Jamaica. His name was Jordan. Jordan loved to eat yam. His mum said, Jordan, do you like some rice? He'd say, no, me want yam. She'd say, would you like some plantain? He'd say, no, me want yam. She said, you want sweet potato? And said, no, me want yam. One day Jordan decided that he was hungry. He went to his mum and he said, Mum, I'm hungry. She said, "Where you want to eat? Don't tell me yam." Him say, "Yes, mommy." She said, "All right, take your little spade, go and dig up your yam. Don't make it too big, because you won't be able to carry it. Don't make it too small, it won't fill your belly. Take it to the river Denzo, wash off all the dirt, bring it back to me, and I will peel it, I will wash it again, I will chop it, and I will cook it with some brown stewed chicken." And say, "Yeah." Jordan take his little spade and he went to the yam piece and him dig and him dig and him dig until he find a yam not too big and not too small. Jordan went to the river Denzo and he started to wash off all the dirt off the yam. But as he was washing off the dirt, the river began to run faster and faster until whoosh, she washed the yam out of Jordan hand. And Jordan put him hand upon him hips and him looked down at the river Denzo and him said, "Denzo, Denzo, give me my yam, the yam that I found on my mother's farm." And the river Denzo whirled and swirled and swirled and whirled and poof, spat out not a yam but a big fat fish. Jordan caught the fish and him said, "This is not a yam, this is a fish." He said, "Well, I could take it to my mother and she can cook it for me with some nice boiled green banana." So he started to walk home with the fish. But he didn't see the hawk that was circling in the sky. And the hawk looked down and the hawk said, and the hawk swept down and snatched the yam out of Jordan's hand, and Jordan put his hands on his hips. And him said, "Hawk, hawk, give me my fish, the fish that Denzo gave me. Denzo took my yam, the yam that I found on my mother's farm." And the hawk shook and shook and shook, and down came one tail feather. Jordan caught the tail feather and he said, "This is not a fish, but it's very soft and beautiful like my mother. I'm going to take it home to my mother." Jordan began to walk home with the feather, but he didn't notice the wind that was blowing nice and gently suddenly blew faster and faster till it snatched away the feather. And Jordan put his hand on his hips and he said, "Wind, wind, give me my feather, the feather that the hawk gave me. Hawk that took my fish, fish that Denzo gave me. Denzo who took my yam, the yam that I found on my mother's farm." And the wind blew all the way from Jamaica to England in the autumn time and came back with a beautiful, colorful leaf and dropped the leaf at Jordan's foot. Jordan picked up the leaf and he said, "I cannot eat this leaf, but it's beautiful like my mother. I go and take it home. I go and make it flat, flat, flat. I go and stick it to a piece of paper. I go and make a frame. And I go and write, 'To Mommy, I love you from Jordan.'" So he began to walk home with his leaf. But he didn't see the goat that was hiding in the bush. And before he could say anything, the goat was eating the leaf. And Jordan said, "That is my leaf." And he put his hand on his hips. And he said, "Goat, goat, give me my leaf, the leaf that the wind gave me. Wind that took my feather, feather that the hawk gave me. Hawk that took my fish, fish that Denzo gave me. Denzo took my yam, the yam that I found on my mother's farm." And the goat spoke. Yes, the goat spoke. The goat said, "I'm sorry. You can't use this calabash around my neck to milk me." So Jordan took the calabash from around the goat's neck, put it underneath the goat, and he began to milk the goat. Till his calabash was full. He said, "Thank you" to the goat, and he began to walk home. And as he was walking home, he didn't see the tree root that was coming out of the ground. That went back down into the ground, and his foot got caught under the tree root. He tripped, the calabash went flying out of his hand and smashed on the ground, and the milk went everywhere. Jordan was so upset. First he lost his yam, then he lost his fish, then he lost his feather, then he lost his leaf, and now he lost the milk. He was so upset. Put his hands on his hips, and he said, "Tree, tree, give me my milk, the milk that the goat gave me. Goat who took my feather, goat that ate my leaf, leaf that the wind gave me. Wind that took my feather, feather that the hawk gave me. Hawk that took my fish, fish that Denzo gave me. Denzo who took my yam, the yam that I found on my mother's farm." And the tree said, "Look behind me." When he went behind the tree, he found a spade, just like the one he had at home for digging up yam.
He found the yam, yeah.
And the tree said, "Dig there." And the tree pointed with his sticky fingers. And Jordan, he dug, and just as you say, he found a yam. And he went to the River Denzel, but this time he held it tight, as he washed it clean. Took it home to his mother. His mother said, "Where have you been?" And he told his mother about the denzo and the yam and about the hawk and the fish, and he told about the feather and the wind, and he talked about the leaf and the goat, and he talked about the leaf, the tree, the yam. And his mother, she had peeled the yam by now, and she had chopped it, and she'd cut it up, and she boiled it, and she gave it to him with some brown stewed chicken, and it was delicious. And that is the end of the story.
I like that. I'm definitely going to listen to that. You're really good at telling the story with the music, with the voice, with the singing.
I've been doing it for a while now, so
that's a real art.
Thank you.
That's a real art. You found your calling.
I have. I really have.
Yeah.
And that's by not really doing anything but following my nose, doing what I like, when I like.
I hear you. That's good. So what have you found? You're running a business there, you're running a company, and I believe that should probably be a lot more successful than it is. Yeah. And I will definitely promote you on my platform as a storyteller. What have you found out about running storytelling business that you know now that you wish you knew when you had started?
You can't do everything on your own.
Okay.
And we start off, you don't realize you're running a business. You start off, you do your thing, you become a sole trader because that's what you're supposed to do. But then you realize that even as a sole trader, you need a team. It's very hard. Because especially with the traveling, I travel around a lot. So in May alone, I took 12 flights. No direct flights from where I was to from where I needed to be to where I was going. So I went to 4 countries, 12 flights. It's really exhausting. So just doing that on its own, and then doing the gigs and planning the workshops and planning the retreats and all of that stuff, and that's before you even look at the admin.
So what countries were you flying to, and was it just specifically to tell stories to an audience?
Yes. So I was in Estonia. Estonia was kind of a working holiday. I've got good friends out there, so I went to stay with them. But they also organised an evening, a cultural evening. So they had writers and folklorists and musicians, folk musicians, etc. Turn up for an evening at their place in Tartu. My good friend Silver Sepp and Christina Ain, so he's a kind of a travelling troubadour, and she is a surrealist writer, poet and novelist. She is.
Yep.
So I hung with them. That was really cool. And then I came back, and then I went over to Vancouver to hang out with some colleagues out there to do a Q&A in a place called The Shire, which is over on... No, that's not true. We didn't get to The Shire. I went to look at The Shire because I'm running one of my retreats over there in August. I went to a place called Duncan, which is a kind of a centre for cultural endeavours on Vancouver Island.
What's your retreats about?
My retreat is called Africa Dreaming, where I look at African mythology as a way of reflecting on the nature, what it means to be human. And so I just use the big African myths to ask these questions, but the answers can only come in the form of a folk tale. So people respond to the themes of the myth with a folk tale that they're going to bring with them and work on. So the myth that I'm going to be doing, I'm running one here in July in Wales, one in Vancouver. They both follow the same theme. The story's called Morella Takes Flight to the Moon, and the themes are all about family constellations. Can you be your truth self inside your family, or do you have to leave to become your truth self? and then if you do leave, become fully realised as yourself for as much as you possibly can. Can you ever return to your family as your fully realised self, or nearly fully realised self? Or will your family only accept the version of you that was created within that family constellation?
So that's quite personal to you based on what you've been saying then?
Yeah, I think it's personal to a lot of people. I think a lot of people struggle with the idea of stepping outside of the family unit and being truly themselves, and whether or not you can return to that family unit as the self you're trying to become. If your family enables that, great, but I think a lot of families do the opposite. Is that this idea of who you're supposed to be that makes everyone feel comfortable, and you can go away and then return to that same family constellation, and suddenly you're an outsider, not because you've done anything wrong, but just because you don't fit anymore.
What's the demographics, your age group of the people who follow you on these? Are they mature
across
people?
Across the board, yeah, across the board, I would say. Some quite mature people, some young people, because a lot of youngers are coming up, they don't know what storytelling is, and they discover it maybe in an environment that they didn't expect to discover it. And then suddenly they're hooked on storytelling. In some cases, you have to be careful because people get hooked on you, and you're not the issue really, it's the story that's the issue. And it's trying to get people to understand that, you don't become attached to your doctor because they dispensed a particular type of medicine.
That's very true.
You get attached to the medicine, right? It would be odd if you started kind of becoming overly obsessed with your doctor.
But it's quite common, because if you think about it, there's religions like the Quran, where they say you should not have any idols, and traditionally Christian, you weren't meant to have any figures or idols, because they acknowledge that issue. That people start to idolize the preacher or the imam and those things, rather than just the overall concept of what the
message is.
Yes, that's correct. What the message is. What would be your advice to somebody who wants to get into storytelling?
Come and see me. I'm a great teacher. No, really. My advice would be, my questions would be why, because it's not in this day and age, in this age that we're living through, if you're a charismatic individual and you know how to hold people's energy and things like that, if you're not a good person, that's dangerous.
Oh yeah, because then you become. I don't want to use the word Trump and be cliche, but you become
you lose the sense of it's very easy to be pushed into this world of being on a pedestal, and then you believe that's where you're supposed to be. You believe the hype about yourself. And I would say, if you want to be a storyteller, you have to know what is it you want to say to the people. How are you going to tell it to the people? Why should the people listen to you? There's all of these questions before you even think about being a storyteller. So I think
that's very, very good points. I really hear what you're saying. What drives you then? Why does Jan want to tell stories and be the lady she is?
I've gotten to the point where I'm no longer fit for purpose other than storytelling. I think I've lost it. I've left it so long that I've buried myself or immersed myself so fully in the form that it's like asking, you wouldn't ask, and I'm not comparing myself, but I can only think of this name. You wouldn't ask Yo-Yo Ma why do you want to be a cellist? You just know Yo-Yo Ma's a cellist. Yeah, you wouldn't ask, I don't know.
Well, I probably would know in me with my podcast. That's one of the main questions I ask. Why this? Why that? Because it's if you could know, if the person I'm interviewing can know and state why about something, then that gives the audience more of an insight.
Yeah, I guess.
Into what drives this person.
I mean, I've gotten to the point as a storyteller where I believe there's so much hidden ancient knowledge in folk tales that, if you can have books, you can have words removed from the dictionary because you're being told they no longer have any function, they're no longer relevant, so people no longer use these words. To me, you can't erase language from people, and in the same way you can't erase stories, you can't erase knowledge. These stories are full of that stuff, and I want that stuff. I want access to that knowledge. I want to learn how to make a fire from limited materials. I want to learn how to identify what is a tree that will help you drink water and what is a tree that will not help you drink water. I want to know how to make water pure, how to take salt water and make it drinkable. I love all that stuff, and stories, to a certain extent, teach you things that maybe aren't seen relevant or seen as relevant anymore. But I think they are relevant, especially if they're teaching you how to survive being human. And if they're teaching you what if they're reflecting back to you what your own humanity is, or what your own humanity could be, where we go wrong as people, what happens when other people. There's so many layers and so many levels that stories are teaching us about what it means to be human. And that's what I love. I love those questions. What does it mean to be human? How do you live in harmony with others when you want to punch them in the face? And it's like, how do you do this? How do you do these things?
Yeah, no, I hear you. I do really hear you, and it's interesting what the questions that you're asking, and the fact that you're asking them.
But I've always been that kind of person. As a child, I was always full of questions about, our time here on this earth, and knowing that our time here is long on one hand and short on another hand, and how when you're here, I'm also Buddhist, right? So these questions are fueled by my philosophy and life.
What made you want to become a Buddhist? I assume you were brought up to be Christian.
I was brought up to be Christian. I went to High Anglican Church until I was 17, and then set fire to my hair in front of the altar.
But you did?
By accident, but I took it as a sign that I was practicing the wrong religion. That I could be stood in front of the crucifix in the altar.
What was your hair at the time?
It was an afro.
Afro.
But it was just.
Did someone? That sounds like someone would have set it on fire.
No. I was carrying the candle myself. I was an acolyte in church. Me and my brother were acolytes, and we sang in the choir. My brother was a thurifer, so he used to swing the thurible,
the incense.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
And I was at the altar. We came up the steps as you usually do, bow as you usually do. But on this day, my hair and the flame made a contact, and my hair was burning in front of the altar. And I was like, come on, if you can set fire to yourself in front of the altar, you might not be practicing the right faith. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It happened in the house of God, so I'm just like...
And how old were you then?
17.
Okay, and so that doesn't explain how you came to Buddhism.
Oh, you didn't ask that. The question how I came to Buddhism was, I first started doing a course, Louise L. Hay, You Can Heal Your Life, which asked a lot of questions about responsibility and accountability for your life, but not in a judgy way. It was just questions. So I did that course, started opening my mind up, I suppose, on how to approach the questions about life. And then I had a friend, Julian, who introduced me to the practice. And I kind of tried to avoid it for a long time.
Why?
Because at the time, I saw it as something that only people who had issues needed. It was quite arrogant of me.
So it's a bit like therapy?
No, it was more...
No, so what I'm saying is, where you say it's somebody who has issues needed, there's people out there who see that with therapy. Oh, you've got to have a problem or kind of be weak to do
in
therapy.
order.
Yeah. Those kind of people do it.
Yeah. And so that was my very arrogant perspective. And then as time went on, I realised that actually, I was working in a theatre company actually in Coventry, and the director was taking the living urine, and old Jan was very combative in situations like that. But there were lots of children.
Why doesn't that surprise me?
No, but I never used to be. You know, all of these
Did London
things,
change you?
London changed me.
Okay.
London changed me. Anyway, the theatre company that I was working with, I want to watch that film.
Okay, The Big Man.
Yeah, I want to see it. Anyway, yes, so this theatre company, we were doing a show that was about apartheid South Africa, and it was very, very, the director was incredibly insensitive.
How so?
She showed us, just as an example of what I was battling inside myself, she showed videos of necklacing. Do you remember the necklacing that used to happen?
Oh yeah, when
Which
you
is where
set
they used
people on fire if they've been traitor or something.
That's right, but there were children as young as 6 years old in that cast that she was showing that to.
Why would she show that?
Because she was trying to create the environment.
Was she a white lady? Because I don't think she'd do that to her own.
No, we all had to watch it.
No, but I mean, so I'm making assumptions here. Were the children white?
No, the children weren't.
Yeah, so that's why I'm saying I don't think she'd do that if it was six.
Yeah, probably not. Probably not. Yeah. But anyway, that is what got my goat, and I had to really check myself because I knew there were children, and you can't accuse someone else of not being a good example to children if you're not going to be a good example.
Yeah.
So it was either be combative and create a problem, or manage my own energy. So I decided to manage my own energy. So I started chanting to not kick off, not lose my temper, to keep it calm and peaceful and fluffy.
But sorry to finish on that note. You're here at your destination. It's great. Where can people find you on social media?
You can find me on Instagram on AKUA Storytelling.
Okay.
That's Acquia Storytelling. You can find me on Facebook, the Acquia Storytelling Project, same spelling. You can find me on LinkedIn as Jan Blake, and you can find me on YouTube as Jan Blake Storyteller.
Thanks a lot for that, and we wish you well.
Thank you.